Welcome to The Finance Files, a podcast hosted by myself, Whitney Coford, and my best friend, Brittany Carter, with occasional appearances by my dad, Greg Coford, and other guests.
We talk about all things finance, including investing, trading, economics, capital markets, and business management. Learn the investor mindset with us.
As a disclaimer and a reminder, this podcast is not investment advice. It is purely for entertainment purposes. And that rolls right into our theme for this week, which is how to discern a reputable resource, how to do research, how to figure out what's fake news versus not. And as an additional sub-disclaimer, we are recording this before the election, and I'm sure the election is going to come up in our discussions this week, so just keep in mind that this was filmed before the election in the U.S. All right, so to get started, Brit, I understand you have a good example of some fake news that was current.
Well, I think what's cool about it is it's almost not even quote unquote fake news in the sense that it all just depends what perspective you have, right? So it was really interesting. They were showing that Trump is essentially running two different ads against Kamala Harris, where in places that have a high Jewish population or are very pro-Israel, they run a like Kamala's like pro-Palestine and like very like, you know, anti like kind of anti-Israel stance. And then on the flip side, they're running ads in areas that have been more on the like, you know, pro-Palestine side that are Israel, Kamala's like very pro-Israel. So like it's interesting to see they're essentially, I mean, and honestly, the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, right? Like I've talked to people that believe both things about Kamala, but it's like we're talking about the same person here. But from a campaign management standpoint, they've decided to angle it both oppositional ways in order to get their desired objective, which is Trump going to be in office, right? So I think it was super fascinating because you can't just like look at an image in an ad or a campaign and be like, oh, Kamala with an Israeli flag behind her, she must be pro-Israel. No, you need to like do your research, understand what's her stance. Like, does, you know, like we don't know all these things unless we actually go into the nitty gritty and start getting those details and start getting them from reputable sources, which is why I'm super excited and passionate about this week because I think it's funny because when we go to Way Back Wednesday, we'll see that his fake news has always been an issue. But I think it's really important that people are able to utilize critical thinking to make educated decisions, especially when they're making important decisions, such as what they're investing in, as well as who they're voting into office.
Absolutely. And as we talked about last week, politics and economics plays a role for everyone and all investors, regardless of how you're invested or what you're invested in, it's going to affect you. So absolutely doing your research and making decisions based off of fact and not just opinion or fake news or what have you is super important. So since this is Market Monday, we're not necessarily just going to stick to the topic. So, Dad, what are you, as an investor, what are you thinking about today?
Well, short term, you should expect volatile markets, and long term, you should expect volatile markets.
Is that purely because of the election, or are you just saying in general expect volatile markets?
I think because of the close nature of the election, there isn't a clear direction in a way to play the market. And I think coming up to the weekend, up to the most recent weekend, a lot of the indicators in the marketplace seem to have come to the conclusion Trump was going to win. But based on the price action over the past several days, and especially over the weekend, it looks like that's now been tempered and it's back to being a clear draw. For instance, Trump media ran up and was trading on Wednesday in the 50s, and now it's back in the 30s. So, and
And
that's not trading on anything to do with any underlying corporate value.
maybe to give a little background on Trump media, can you kind of fill us in on what is Trump media and why you're paying attention to it?
So, Trump Media is a media company that Donald Trump was involved in the founding of when he got kicked off of Twitter. And this was their answer was to start this other company, Trump Media, and he owns a huge portion of it. They ended up merging it with a SPAC, and then that was how they went public.
Pause. What is a SPAC?
A special purpose acquisition corp. So these are entities that are set up that investors throw money at and hope that management teams can find an operational company to acquire so that there's a company in there. But when you do the original investment in the SPAC, you have no idea what's going to end up in it.
Sounds a lot like gambling.
Well, that's one way of looking at it.
Or speculating, if we're going to use our vocabulary from previous weeks.
Yes, yes. So anyway, so Trump Media, it managed to garner, less than 1 million users, well less than 1 million users. And active users, I think, measure in the couple of 100,000. And so it's never shown any impact or viability as a media company in the way we traditionally think about it. But Trump supporters have come to view it as a substitute for showing their fanaticism for endorsing Trump and backing that by throwing money at it. The company loses money, has no prospects of actually making any, given the current business plan. And now that Trump has been let back onto Twitter/X with the current, with his infatuation with Elon Musk, it really raises a question of what the value is of Trump Media going forward, and would there ever be any practical use for it?
So so backing up a little bit, why you said the stock went up to 50 and then back down to 30 just over the weekend?
Yeah, it was trading at 50 on Wednesday, and today it was trading in the low 30s. It went down to like 28 and then bounced back up
And you
above the
think
30s.
and why is that relevant?
Well, I think what happens is as the again, clearly it's not trading based on any perceived business value. There's not a business model that
Right.
would account for the value being assigned to the stock. So I therefore conjecture, and this is my conjecture, that it's clearly a substitute for investor enthusiasm to show their prospects that they think Donald Trump's going to win. I don't know how it becomes an operational business if he does win, because again, he seems to have a preference for X now over any posting he does on on the platform that Trump Media has.
So wait, so who do we have any concept as to like who these investors are? Is it all just like your like everyday individual investors? Are there institutional? I'm assuming no institutional investors given there's no company value, but I maybe I'm wrong on this.
Well, yeah, I mean, there you wouldn't a traditional investment vehicle, doing any sort of fundamental analysis would never invest in this stock. Um, there may be some that invest because they are fans of Donald Trump and want to show support for him with the money that they happen to be managing. Um,
Does Trump
that would,
Media distribute the Bible to like I heard something about him having a special Bible?
yeah, and I heard about that too, but I don't know whether Trump Media is involved in
Okay, it's a
the distribution
different.
of that or not. But looking back, to answer your question, according to Bloomberg, ARC Global Investments has a 3.7% holding, and they're the largest institutional investor.
I remember you talking about someone did like an equity line of credit or something like that. Is that ARC or
Well,
was
that's not
that?
the group that did that.
Oh,
And
it
those
was.
the guys that did the equity line of credit will never show up as holders. because their modus operandi is to typically sell the stock as quick as they get it.
Okay, so going back to the volatile markets, you mentioned the markets will probably be volatile both in the short term and the longer term. So for a passive investor who maybe is just invested with their retirement account, they're not worried about, their return until further into their retirement age. Do you think that volatility today is going to affect things in the longer term?
Well, the things that a presidential candidate does um, can have impacts on the market long term. The idea that Trump's idea that uh, tariffs are a good thing is clearly from a lack of understanding how tariffs work. Because at the end of the day, consumers pay for that. And with his announced plan to put tariffs on all imports, that basically turns into a national sales tax. Is in reality what it is. It's just disguised as a tariff.
And again, that's kind of what we talked about last week is on Market Monday is even if you're a passive investor and you're not actively trading or, investing in maybe specific stocks, your portfolio is still going to get affected. And if you own a house or you own a car and you have an interest rate, all of that is going to be affected by whoever gets elected.
Or if you want
Right.
to buy something and it's now being taxed like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
um,
the idea of putting a tariff on everything that's imported would be very inflationary and would cost everybody a lot of money
Yay,
because a
inflation.
significant chunk of what we consume is imported or has components or ingredients that are imported.
So Greg, we have checks and balances. Uh, what's the what's the intervention on like House and Senate that would like prevent? Because I feel like a lot of promises are made by presidential candidates, but it's very hard to get a lot of the promises they
Well,
make.
tariffs can be done by presidential action. There's not a necessary. I mean, Congress could get together and change the law to make it to where a president couldn't do that, but a president can put in place tariffs
Gotcha.
under a couple of different guises, one of which could be arguably national security.
Kind of like the equivalent of how the federal government owns a bunch like mandates across the like all. It's so interesting when I learned more about the origins. Like basically, the federal government was supposed to be super small, but through the Interstate Commerce Clause, which obviously almost every business does business out of state, they basically are able to just control everything now. And I remember when I got older and actually started paying my taxes, I was like, wait, the federal government is getting how much of this? Like, we complain about state tax, but we just kind of ignore the fact that the federal tax is way higher.
Well, I think part of that is you can control what state you live in to some extent, right? So it's easier to complain and be like, well, this state has better taxes versus this other state. But the federal tax, it is what it is. So, Britt, you had another article that you wanted to discuss? Again,
Yeah,
not
just
related to fake news,
not
but
related to fake news, but I think we said we want Market Mondays to be pertinent information that might be applicable to people. And there was a recent court ruling that essentially has set the precedent that. Um, so we talked a lot with the retirement savings how a lot of companies will do a match, and like you should absolutely be taking advantage of that match. It's free money, and that can go towards your retirement. A recent ruling has now made it where you can not only like, and this is up to the company to decide, but the company can say, hey, you can put this match towards your retirement or a health retirement account or a health savings account or educational payoff account, so educational assistant programs, educational assistance program. I think this is a really cool concept because if you're an employer, you're putting that match in no matter what. And you're probably going to actually incentivize. There's the percentage of people that are saving for their retirement versus the percentage of people that have student loans to pay off is, I mean, I think it's a really great incentive and it could really help a lot of people get out of student debt or pay for any like health expenses a lot more easily. So I think it's something really cool. Hopefully, more companies will adopt it now that that precedent has been set. But it's, right now it's only been ruled for one company.
Well, and it sounds like if you choose to allocate that match to a health reimbursement arrangement or educational assistance, that you could potentially access that money sooner than retirement. Is that
Yeah,
correct?
that's so,
Yeah.
yes. So a health savings account you can use at any time for medical purposes. So I don't know if I harped on this enough. If you guys have an HSA option, it's so funny. I didn't know about it until a few years ago, and every time I talk to anyone that's rich, they're like, "Oh yeah, HSA," like they act like it's so commonplace. Health savings account is amazing. It's letting you have all those dollars pre-tax for medical expenses. So you think about how much money you're paying in taxes, all of that is like pre-tax dollars that you can utilize for health expenses. So if you have that option, definitely take advantage of it. And then you can also you can invest that. And I think there's a point after retirement where it doesn't even have to be utilized for health related expenses. So it's just like one of those other sneaky vehicles that, like investment vehicles, people don't necessarily know about. And for me personally, it's been great when I have medical expenses to be able to pay for those through the HSA program.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and it's also a way to, like we talked about, I think 2 weeks ago or a week ago, the matching is basically free money. And if you're putting that into your retirement account, you're not going to be able to access that until retirement. Typically, there's ways, but it's costly. All right. Well, I think that's all we have time for Market Monday. Join us tomorrow for Topic Tuesday, where we really dig into fake news and research and how to select your resources. Thanks for joining us.